Hi, I'm Kelvin Mischo from Wolfram Research.
And hi, I'm Ashley Brozenec from Wolfram Research.
Our talk is a hands-on start to Wolfram Alpha Notebook Edition. So we'll show a live look at the product and talk about the spirit of the product.
Today we're going to talk about Wolfram Alpha Notebook Edition and what it is. Likely you have heard about this product and that is why you're here today. Maybe you are wondering why we needed a new tool. Maybe you just wanted to see what it looks like. We'll cover that too. And of course we'll tell you how to get your hands on it. So all of you know that Mathematica is an expert software, calculation, visualization, and data analysis capabilities that rivals any of our competitors. Our team has done an amazing job building natural language programming for Wolfram Alpha. But unfortunately, for the K-12 and community college market, there are some limitations of those two things in themselves. So we needed to provide something where the programming wasn't a hurdle. Wolfram language can be too hard for some. And using the Wolfram Alpha notebook, Wolfram Alpha website can be limiting because you're just doing one-off calculations. So we needed to marry the two environments. This way we can reach new, young, inexperienced, non-technical users. So Kelvin, what does this look like?
Yeah, so we are breaking from format and giving this presentation in the Wolfram Alpha Notebook Edition. So the first thing, as Ashley mentioned, it's the best of notebooks and Wolfram Alpha. And it's got all the cool notebook structure, of course. So you can make text cells, you can have explanation, and you can have live calculations all in the same format. So just as you can do this in Mathematica and Wolfram language, you can do this in Notebook Edition. So Stephen talked about this a bit at the keynote, so I will try not to repeat what he said, but the workflow for Wolfram Alpha Notebook Edition really points you towards this everyday English way of entering calculations. It is, that being said, it's all notebooks. A notebook is a notebook, but in terms of the workflow, it really encourages you to use this everyday English, to use the Wolfram Alpha technology to turn plain everyday English into something that is a computation. So here in this case, we're just simplifying an algebraic expression. And then also we can say something like graph that. So this is one big difference between this, having this in a local notebook in a product versus the website. The website is very, very useful, but it's very much a one-shot experience. You go there, you do one calculation, you do the next one, you do the next one. There's not really a good narrative or a good history, nor can it remember your last calculation. So this is one huge benefit to the Notebook Edition, where when you say graph that, there's a notion of what was my last calculation? What was that? Which is unique to this product and very, very useful. The other thing that's built into the product is step-by-step solutions. So if you say derivative of something, there are these suggestion bars here that are specific to this product. So when you click on this, this is going to start a new Wolfram Alpha notebook input. It's going to say, show the steps of this. And then in terms of checking your homework or working on this as a learner, there is the recognition that the chain rule is good for this. You know, it follows typical textbook formats where it coaches you through this sort of problem. But if you're learning this, you can click the one at a time show steps to figure out, did you make an addition error? Do you have it right? Do you not understand the concept? You should read the chapter again. So that show steps part of this, which is a big part of the website, is also present here and works the same way. Just as you can say graph that, you can define variables and functions as well. So you can say set a equals to 5, 5a equals 10. And so here, in this case, not only am I turning everyday English into a computation, but there is the notion of it's remembering what a is through this session. So if you're working on a problem and defining things and exploring things bit by bit by bit, this whole concept is really useful. You can unset a, and then it goes back to a symbol, where if we say what is 5a plus 10, then it gives us A as a symbol again. So just as Wolfram language notebooks have this notion of calculations and the kernel is remembering what's going on, Wolfram Alpha Notebook Edition has this as well. Whereas you work through these projects, you can define things and undefine things in the same way. You can also define functions. So if I say set f of x equal to x squared plus 5, and then I use the derivative notation for that, or work with f of x, the notion of f of x is present in this as well. So Stephen showed some more general examples of plotting and things like that. The capabilities of this is all built on the same Wolfram language, just like Wolfram Alpha is. So I'm showing a few unique things here, but keep in mind that the plotting engine, the solving engine, the derivatives, that's all the same engine that's in the core Wolfram language. So it's the power of Mathematica with this easy interface to enter calculations. You can also graph something where you say, graph a certain equation, varying a from 1 to 5. And then what that does is it creates a manipulate. So when you say vary a from 1 to 5, really what you're looking for is varying an input and looking at a pattern. So you're building a model here where you explore some property of this equation or some property of something. And it's very nice that this sort of everyday English is understood as well. You can work with 3D graphics. And this is not a talk on the Wolfram Alpha parser, but the Wolfram Alpha parser has a lot of experience with understanding what we mean when we say x and y. In this case, we're talking about a surface plot because we're treating those as variables. But the idea of shortcutting a lot of these things where as a learner or as a student or as someone just doing everyday computation, however you state some sort of calculation or graphic or whatever everyday English you use for that, the goal is that that works and that the parser handles that very nicely. You can also do special characters. I'm in the notebook presentation here, but if you end this and go to a new notebook, oops, yeah, there we go. So there's a button for special characters. Again, similar to the pro version of wolframalpha.com, where you have the common things you need like pi and like infinity and square roots and things. So to use that in the notebook here, go back to full screen. So we can say pi to 100 digits and calculate that. Or we can calculate something like a limit, but instead of using x or a or something like that, we can use special characters and infinity and things like that. And all these things work very, very well. So in addition to this and supporting this, we are planning a reference text, which I'll show just a little bit of. So myself and Michael Morrison and Cliff Hastings, who is sitting here, you might know that we have a reference text for Wolfram language, where let me go to the first part of this. So we have the Hands-on Start to Wolfram Mathematica textbook, where it's a slow build of complexity. It's meant for novice users. It's not specific to any field. It's just a very good general resource. This is the view of the Wolfram language book. We are planning a book for Wolfram Alpha Notebook Edition as well, where this will be a nice reference. This chapter follows the other book where it's a sample project. We feel like this is a useful thing just to understand the bounds of the project. So something where you might want to query some data. What's the minimum wage in Massachusetts? Or query some dates. This particular case is a project where it's a student who's working a summer job and trying to figure out how much should they work and how much time can they take off. So asking a real world question like, if I can only work Monday through Friday, what's the next Monday after May 21st, 2019? That's a very relevant question. But this first chapter is designed to be a sample project that shows things like working with dates or working with units, or some parses like make a graph of a line connecting two specific points, and then we get a nice graph there with the points as well. So the supporting text is something that we're planning, and we feel like that this will be like the last book, where it will be a good reference text. It'll give people ideas, and also probably a jumping off point to then make your own materials. Okay, and then Ashley's going to talk about availability and how we're rolling out this product and how you can get it.
So the initial release of Wolfram Notebook Edition is desktop only, but the cloud is in development now, and in the not too distant future, we will release a hybrid version that has desktop and cloud access. And for those of you that are Mathematica users, in the next release of Mathematica, the ability to create these special notebooks, these Wolfram Alpha notebooks, will be built into your Mathematica. So the product is Wolfram Alpha Notebook Edition. The capability to create those notebooks will be a part of your Mathematica version in the next release. So today you can get version 1. It is available on our web store. It is, as you can kind of gather from Kelvin and my talk today, a pre-college focused product. So we're looking at professors, high school teachers, students, as well as home hobbyists. This is not intended to be a commercial product, especially for the initial release. What about at your organization? Well, many of you come to us from site licensed schools. So we have models where you can have full faculty, staff, student access to our technologies. So we have a plan to roll this in so that you can add this to an existing site license that you have. You can start a new site license. So maybe you come from a school who only has limited access to Mathematica, but this is the thing that would get widespread access and use of our technology. We can start a Wolfram Alpha Notebook Edition site license at your school. Maybe you are a 4-year professor, so you're at one of those first group. You have that big site license, but you also do some adjunct work at a community college. And that community college has no access to our type of technology. You could start a site license of Wolfram Alpha Notebook Edition at that community college, whereas you're using Mathematica back at your, quote, home base or your 4-year. And then, of course, we offer bundles. So maybe it's Wolfram Alpha Pro and Wolfram Alpha Notebook Edition, or it's one of those subscription models. And if you're super motivated today, there are some steps that you can take. So number 1, go to our web store. You can buy Wolfram Alpha Notebook Edition student subscriptions for your children. They're probably students, right? You can register those licenses in their names. If you're a home hobbyist, you could buy your own subscription and register it in your name, of course. If you're a Mathematica user, make sure you have active service, because as I said, when we release the next version of Mathematica, you'll have this notebook capability in it, and you'll get that for free as a benefit of your service. If you are in that group where you're a site license group, or rather you're a faculty member at a site license school, and you're wondering about what this looks like at your individual campus and how do I get this added or who do I lobby to, just email me. I can be your direct point of contact for that. And then lastly, Kelvin and I are running a hands-on workshop right after this, so stay in your seat and have some firsthand experience. Look at that. We have extra time, and we obviously have flexibility because we have the next block too. So some questions?
So you showed all these natural image inputs which produced an actual input cell. Mm-hmm. Can you edit those pretty input cells?
Yes. Yeah, so that's probably something I should have touched on more, which is this is also acts as a tutor for Wolfram language. So just as in the wolframalpha.com website, you can click and get that pod that shows the Wolfram language, you can, hopefully in presentation mode, go in here. And once you start typing it, it goes from, well, that wasn't a very big change, was it? Okay. Cosine or something. Okay. So when you start to type in here, it goes from gray to black, and then you can start typing it. So I think the initial use of it is very driven towards starting with everyday English. But yes, that's a big part of it, where once you start to see square brackets and things like that, then people very well might just start to use Wolfram language when they I mean, there's a limit to what the parser can do, obviously. There's always the next customization that you want to do that Wolfram Alpha can't quite keep up with. So when you hit that point, the language is there and it starts to tutor you. Thank you. That's a good question.
And now we envision this as these high school students then become college students, and the more introduction that they've had to our technology, the more prepared they are for that more advanced use. And those students obviously then become our future commercial and academic users as well. So there's that continuum that some are starting with Wolfram Alpha Notebook Edition and eventually moving to Mathematica as they grow and advance in their careers. And others, this is the product for them. You know, as I mentioned, those young and experienced or non-techie people, the non-tech people might just want to have access to our capabilities and not ever want to dive into the code. Yes?
You said graph that. What happens when I say graph the above? So what's your phrase dictionary? How do you get a feel for that?
Yeah, good question. There are several options. I don't know the entire full rubric, but the percent sign works. So if you're a Wolfram language user, I think I have to go back a couple. No, it was this one. Okay. Oops. I keep doing that. Okay.
Because you know that was hard when you get started with Wolfram Alpha. You have to have specific queries. You can't start doing this.
Yeah. So what you said literally, I think, was graph above, which works. There are probably more like a dozen things that work, not hundreds of things, but hopefully we've chosen the smart ones where we're one for one here with your suggestions, which is good.
If you make an input and you don't, how do you say try again?
Which would you, so if you say,
Graph who knows what, and you don't understand it, what happens now?
I mean, if you say this, so yes, okay. Yeah. Yeah, Richard?
Two questions. Number one, I assume that the online current version will continue as before.
Yes.
Yeah. He was asking, oh, sorry, go ahead. No, you can say it, Richard, sorry.
I asked that whether the current online version of Wolfram Alpha would continue as before, and their answer was yes. My second question is that you mentioned this would be included in 12.1. If one is a beta tester, should you have already seen it?
Ooh, good question. I don't think either of us know a lot about the pre-release program, but talk to us after and we'll make sure you talk to the right person. I think
the short answer is no, but I'll double check right now.
Thanks.
okay, thank you. Yeah. Okay, and getting back to your first question too, the spirit of this is a group, to reach a new group, not to replace, not to move people from one product to the other. And I think I personally will still use the website. I still use the app. I still want to do that one-off calculation. I think that workflow will still be useful. It being on the web is useful in and of itself. The benefit here is if you want to take that next step, integrate it into your course, and really have some guided courseware where it's not just the student going off and doing whatever and you have no idea what they're doing, but you're really guiding what they're doing. That's the void we're trying to fill, so to speak.
So actually, I just checked, the conference beta should have it. If you go to File, New, you will see Wolfram Alpha Mode Notebook, and that will give you the same capability.
Yeah, if a kid writes a lab report or something with this, wants to export it, submit it, can he print it, ship it as a file? Is the file executable? How does the teacher deal with the grading?
Yeah, so similar to you would have to make those same decisions with Mathematica. The decisions would be similar to Wolfram Alpha Notebook Edition. I don't know a ton about, I think you can probably save it to PDF or print it. I'm not totally sure that that's exactly accurate, but I mean, people could print it out. What we intend, though, is the product is subscription-based and that the instructor and the students would all have their own subscriptions. And when they save their finished project as a notebook, then they would somehow turn it in. Then a dot notebook, right? Yes. It would be, yes.
Yeah. Any notebook you create in Mathematica can be opened in Wolfram Alpha Notebook Edition, and anything
Right.
We work very hard.
Intentionally,
Yeah.
yes.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, but the question you're asking is a really good one. So when we have the browser-based version of this, then we can piggyback more on the publishing and sharing infrastructure of the cloud, where instead of trying to email files or manage files or is the file too big, that whole infrastructure of sending around URLs, which is much, much easier, then that will apply to this as well. So when we have the browser-based version, that whole running a class will go from good to really, really good. Sorry, Cliff.
Building on that, you want to talk about, you guys talked about high school and junior college, but at a university where you have Mathematica for calc sequence and you have notebook edition for a college algebra course, that exchanging documents back and forth through Mathematica notebook editions and how easy that is. I just want to talk a little bit about that.
Yeah, that's a good question. And I mean, a notebook is a notebook. So although this will exist in 12.1 in Mathematica, you know, there's a certain, if you have to explain too much, that's never a good thing. So if you're teaching a college algebra class and you have to say, okay, go to this other mode and disregard this and don't do the language and do this, it is easier to have this sort of separate environment that really makes this foolproof where students will use this. However, that being said, if the students have Wolfram Alpha Notebook Edition and they send you a notebook and you open it in Mathematica, in 12.1 it will look the same. So we're not taking things away in Wolfram Alpha Notebook Edition. We're more guiding you to that workflow so that when you're authoring things and starting things, you start with the everyday English. But the interchange between the two, especially after 12.1 is released. But it seems to work okay now, doesn't it, Cliff? Yeah, it seems to work okay now, but 12.1 it will work better.
And just on a more technical answer to that question, I mean, most of the changes we've made have been to simplify the menu items, so it's less scary and confusing and just keep the really essential menu items. Basically, you know, if you're a power user and you know how to use Alt-O and you know how to use the Options Inspector, anything you can do in Mathematica, you can do in Wolfram Alpha Notebook Edition. But that's not the easy path. The easy path is to use these notebooks.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah?
So you said it'll be integrated with, all this functionality will be in 12.1 Mathematica. Will that also be in Wolfram Desktop and Wolfram Programming Lab on desktop?
That's a good question. I don't know the answer to that. I would imagine Programming Lab, no. Desktop, I don't know. Yes, Clayton, yes? Yes, okay. Clayton, what do you think about the Programming Lab? Okay. No on Programming Lab, yes on Wolfram Desktop.
So at this point, if you are not going to stay for the workshop part, we'll stop there so that you can get to another talk. But if you are staying for our workshop, we can give you 5 more minutes of question and answer before we get going with the hands-on part.
Yeah, but thank you everyone for coming.